West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining us now for his first U.S. television interview is veteran, former espionage prosecutor, and former member of Robert Mueller's team. He worked on the prosecutions of Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort. His name is Brandon Van Grack. Mr. Van Grack, it's a real pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you as well.
First of all, thank you for doing this. I know you don't do this, so I'm very grateful that you've decided to be here. I want to talk to you about a lot of things in your career, but I want to start with the national discourse right now around this investigation involving the search warrant at the president's home in South Florida. The headlines that say this is an inquiry under the Espionage Act are continuing to blow everybody's minds. I still find it to be almost impossible to look at those headlines and not see this as a movie and see this as real life. But as somebody who's actually worked in the nitty-gritty around this part of the law, what should we understand about the seriousness here, and do you feel like any of the national discourse around it is wrong or overblown?
So it's a really important point, because right now there is a focus on what is the end game. Is someone going to be charged? And you don't need to get to that point to appreciate the fact that there is serious national security implications from the conduct and the information just before us. I mean, it's just from the receipt of the search warrant. There are multiple series of documents that are classified, that are labeled top secret, that were in unsecured locations for 19 months. We already know the fact that there were classified documents that were provided to the archives 7 months before that. You don't need to take any more leaps beyond that to appreciate the fact that there's real national security harm and potential damage caused by that. Right now, the intelligence community is sorting through that information and doing a damage assessment, trying to assess what sources and methods have been compromised. That's separate from whether, in fact, anyone is charged. And so it's important that we don't get too far ahead of what's in front of us.
One of the things that's been sort of described by reporters, and I'm not quite sure that I totally understand it, I think I get it in my head, but not in my gut, is that the Justice Department's reference to the potential statutes that are implicated here, I keep hearing it described that it doesn't necessarily matter, that the way they are citing statutory law doesn't necessarily matter if Trump believes that he declassified those documents, that the technical classification status of those documents wouldn't necessarily impact whether or not charges could be brought on those statutes. Do you agree with that assessment, looking at what we've seen in the search warrant? And can you explain it?
Yeah, so I think that might be technically true, but in reality, I think ultimately, if in fact this material was declassified, I think it would have a material impact on whether charges are brought. So the charge referenced in the Espionage Act, it concerns the mishandling and retention of classified information. It's 18 United States Code 793. And the language in the statute says the retention of national defense information. And that's defined through years of case law. It doesn't say classified information. But for all intents and purposes, the Justice Department considers that to be classified information. There's only one case in its history where information that was not classified information was charged, and that was actually a plea agreement. So it wasn't sort of tested. And so for all intents and purposes, if the Department of Justice believes or has reason to believe that this information was declassified, and we don't know that, then it is very unlikely that what's called a retention case, that the retention charge would occur. Now, with respect to the other two charges that were mentioned in the search warrant, there was one concerning obstruction and another concerning the removal of ultimately presidential records. That also doesn't have a connection to classified information, so it doesn't technically matter. But ultimately, the motive and intent behind the removal of the information or the obstruction does matter. And so if people involved in the process did believe they were declassified, that matters. Now, that doesn't mean, and therefore it precludes a criminal prosecution on those two statutes. But the point is, it's matter and it's relevant. And so I don't think simply saying it's immaterial is the right way to view the charges.
If the person in question here, one of the people in question here, is potentially in trouble because of the way these documents were handled, is the former president, is there a way to divine his intent for the purposes of deciding whether charges are warranted without interviewing him? So the reality is, if he's the target of an investigation, there isn't going to be an interview. I mean, that just, and we do know from the information that you discussed in the top of the hour that there's discussion in the government's recent filing in terms of the decision not to unseal the affidavit, that there are witnesses who are cooperating in the investigation. They specifically say that's a basis for not unsealing the affidavit. So there are certainly people in the orbit that would have information that would be relevant to understanding intent and motive. One of the things that arose today in the news was a claim by former President Trump that his passports went walkies during the search warrant, during the execution of the search warrant. He described them as being stolen by the FBI. There's later reporting suggesting that these were perhaps that his passports were taken as part of the execution of the search warrant and then returned to him. What should we understand about that? So
a couple pieces, which is, first, there's a lot of noise that happens in these investigations, and it's really important that we're not distracted by the cacophony and really focus on the important information. And that goes to my earlier point, which is, just based on what we know, there are significant national security implications behind what happened. With respect to the passport, if that is in fact true, if in fact there were multiple passports of the former president taken, there's really not much to read into that. It is unlikely that the Department of Justice is signaling that the former president is a flight risk. It is unlikely that the Department of Justice is signaling that criminal charges are imminent. More likely, again, if it is in fact true, it is simply responsive to the search warrant. The search warrant specifically said it can seize presidential records. And so perhaps the FBI believed, I don't know rightly or wrongly, that these passports were presidential records. There's also in the search warrant, it says information that's commingled with the classified information should be seized. And so for all we know, these passports were commingled. But talking about something that ultimately I don't think is significant, if for any reason the denial of these passports impaired the president's ability to travel, I'm certain that a simple call from the president's lawyers to the Department of Justice would resolve that. So ultimately, I think it's a distraction, and it's important because there are some real serious issues here that we don't get distracted by.
I think it's one of those things where it's like you see, the government has his passports, and you immediately go to the issue of Law and Order, where the guy gets arrested and his passports are seized because he's seen as a flight risk, but there's nothing here to indicate
that's right.
Connection.
And look, there are instances where passports do get seized, but that is when someone is about to be charged or has been charged, and there's no indication that we've reached that point in an investigation.
I also wanted to ask you about the news reported in the New York Times this weekend that President Trump, through an intermediary, appears to have tried to reach out to the Attorney General after this search warrant was executed, obviously, and after the Attorney General, around the time the Attorney General was making his decision to both speak publicly about it and to ask for the search warrant to be unsealed. Just from the perspective of somebody who's in the Justice Department at the kind of levels that you worked at, is that wrong? Is that weird? Is that appropriate? Is that normal? How do you view that?
I guess I view it as irrelevant.
Okay.
The reality is there are probably outreaches that occur to senior levels of the government Department of Justice all the time. This is something where I cannot see or think of a situation where an outrage like that will have any impact on the investigation. And so, appropriate or not, again, I don't think it will have any impact on the investigation. And again, really, I would consider it to be noise or a distraction when the fact is, again, there are real national security issues at play, and that really should be the focus.
Well, let me ask you about another thing, which may just be a distraction, but from the outside it seems at least fraught. I mean, we've now seen 3 Trump White House lawyers, the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, his deputy, Pat Philbin, and now today we learned Eric Hirschman, all White House lawyers working for the president, all having received subpoenas from the Justice Department. We don't exactly know the topic. We don't even know which grand jury. There's a lot of different investigations. That itself is remarkable. We've also seen a member of Congress had his phone seized as part of an investigation in which he reportedly has been told he's a witness and not a target. When you're talking about White House lawyers and serving members of Congress and these sorts of people who aren't typically caught up in the work of the Justice Department, how does that influence you, your decisions as a prosecutor, as an investigator, knowing that people with a lot of political power and people working in sensitive political jobs are in your sights? Well,
I think one of the signals from the Attorney General and the Justice Department, which is really important to stress, is that ultimately those considerations really are not having impact, and that's in multiple investigations. In fact, I think there's also reporting today indicating that the search warrant with respect to Mar-a-Lago was sitting with the Attorney General for a period of time, and that he was wrestling with it. And I think what we can say, even though I think it's common for there to be disagreement in some of the actions from the Department of Justice, that all of the actions we're talking about are not influenced by political considerations, and there really is no appearance of political influence in these decisions. And I think that is such a critical issue for the Department of Justice. I mean, really, if you take a step back and appreciate when you talk about the Department of Justice, it is foundational to the legitimacy of the government to exercise its authority. I mean, it is a department that has the ability to deprive an individual of their liberty. And so the legitimacy of that department is paramount. And I think the Attorney General not only appreciates that, but you can see through his words and deeds that that is a constant theme in how he acts.
It is Tuesday, the 16th of August of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world, even though that dictator Viktor Orban is running the show over there. You know, the Spanish paprika, I'm just reminded folks, the Spanish paprika is quite expensive, but it is really no better than the Hungarian paprika. The only reason the Spanish paprika is terribly expensive is because there's lots less of it. So if Orban continues, maybe we need to help Spain and possibly even Portugal, don't tell anyone, to up their paprika production. Bring the price down. All right, how are you today? It's election day. I guess it's hard for me to call Liz Cheney a moderate Republican. I guess now she is, compared to what the extreme is. But, yeah, so I guess she'll be kicked out of office and she'll make a run for president, and hopefully that will split the Republican vote. Hopefully. And then we'll see what happens. It's all a gambit. Everybody's trying to ride the wave. Whatever that wave is, they're riding it. And we warned them long ago, even before Reagan. In my lifetime, it was pretty much Nixon. We got mad at LBJ, but LBJ brought us the Great Society, and I don't think that was so bad. Voting Rights Act, geez, all sorts of stuff. Civil Rights Act, my gosh. But you know, LBJ was involved in that war, and let's be clear, he inherited it. And when it got too much, he decided to call it off, get out of town. And then Nixon and Kissinger and their ilk, you know, Roger Stone, all of them, They decided, hey, you know what? We can make a lot of money here. Military-industrial complex, baby. And they did. And they got caught. And maybe they got caught with the equivalent of Capone not paying taxes kind of caught. And that made them so very mad. And now we have Roger Stone and his ilk. You know, right after Watergate, Roger Stone, Manafort, and Lee Atwater began their lobby shop. And what was that lobby shop? It was pretty much a anti-democracy. Let's get rid of democracies around the world and make money at it at the same time. And they did. You don't think the School of Americas just popped out of nowhere, do you? Do you? I know. The CIA and others already had the School of the Americas under their purview, but I think that it got weaponized in a certain way during certain administrations. So we are suffering the effects, the get back over Nixon. And it's personified in one Donald Trump. I mean, he's got all of them. He's got, you know, even Reagan. Oh, yeah, I'm a folksy kind of guy. Trump, a folksy kind of guy. You got to be damn brainwashed to believe that BS. You have to be pretty damn brainwashed to think that guy is the model of virility. Gee, big dick energy, this. You know, they got all on Beto's case. NPR got all on Beto's case for calling a motherfucker because the motherfucker made fun of little kids whose bodies were liquefied by a weapon of war. NPR got all bent out of shape about that one, but they had nothing to say about Kerry Lake getting up on stage and saying, oh yeah, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, they got BDE, big dick energy. If you don't know what that is, ask your kids. NPR was so concerned that the kids and the elderly might be a little offended if they heard the term motherfucker about a motherfucker who laughed about little kids' bodies being liquefied on the inside by a weapon of war. This is what we're up against. It doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what we have this like corroborating evidence about one's bad behavior and won't you change? No. Sometimes it just gets right down to punching the Nazis, and that doesn't necessarily mean punching them across the face, but you can punch them in the wallet and maybe a few other places too. Okay? Yeah, punch them where it hurts. Now, when they talk about, rounding us up and killing us, that's what they mean. There's no hyperbole about that. They're not talking about rounding us up and herding us into, a debtor's prison. Well, maybe they would. Maybe that tangible. I'm just saying, when 11 days before an election and the FBI director comes out and talks about an investigation into Hillary Clinton, because they found something, and then they turned out they hadn't found anything. But 11 days. I don't really remember any liberal, Democratic-leaning Hillary voter mobilizing to overthrow the United States of America, take over state houses, threaten the FBI. And when I say threaten, I mean storming the FBI offices with armed people. I don't remember any of that. And yet we are the evil ones. They have to go and do all that they do because of how evil we are, because we're baby eaters. Sounds to me like a pogrom. Doesn't it? We eat babies. We drink their blood. Where have we heard that before in the history of pogroms? Where? Punch the Nazis. You don't negotiate with Nazis. You can't change them into good people. If they're Nazis, there's no changing them. I kid you not. And there's historical precedent about that. Oh, I don't know. Maybe the guy that wrote The Drummer Boy. Who knows? There were people who were forced into it. Indeed, we know that. But how many good Germans refused to salute the Fuhrer like the lone German did? Who, by the way, was married to a German woman. Who, by the way, was married to a Jewish woman. Who, and his wife and daughter were spirited off to a concentration camp, and he was sent to fight on the Eastern Front, and that's where he died. The lone German. But he refused. Very famous picture. Hundreds of thousands of these good Germans saluting the Fuhrer. One man didn't. Is that what we're going to become? I sure hope not. On the other hand, for every one of those lone Germans who refused to salute Hitler, I like to believe that they represent quite a number of people. I like to think that. So let's only hope, because there's a lot of people who are not going to show their face in those instances, but they don't harbor the Nazi ideology. But a good German is just a nice way of saying they were Nazi sympathizers. You let the Nazis get away with it and, defend it in some sort of fashion. Oh, well, there's a rule that says all I have to do is as soon as it leaves this door, I have a standing rule that all that is declassified. Well, it was brought up that, he's supposed to have the nuclear football nearby at all times, so that means it goes near or up to his residence. Did that become declassified when it went out the door? If these people had taken the time to learn how America works, which I mean taking civics classes, now I have to hear these people say, oh, well, civics classes, that's just programming, that's brainwashing people. It is. I think it's teaching them about democracy. Brainwashing. Brainwashing is thinking that Donald Trump is a virile personification of God on earth. Please. All right. Weisselberg is going to cop to a plea. I don't know what's the come of that yet, because I am in the bubble, But he's not going to give up the goods on Trump. Yep. That means that he'll be back in the family when he serves his 100 days. Jesus. 100 days. Well, he had some time served, too. But 100 days. Anybody else? I don't need to finish the sentence, do I? Well, why don't we attend to what we have curated for you today? Because we, as in the royal, we do take the time to put a curated show together to have some sort of, even like a linear storyline. Sometimes. Beginning has an arc into the middle, and then, you got the crescendo at the end. Sometimes. Anyway, why don't we attend to that at this moment? And at the top, that was Rachel breaking it down with the former top espionage prosecutor at the Justice Department about what matters and what doesn't in the Trump secret papers probe. And a little bit of, let's be clear, a little bit of psychohistory of Merrick Garland. Let us not forget he got a death penalty on McVeigh. He got multiple life sentences for Rudolph, the Atlanta Olympics bomber, and multiple life sentences on the Unabomber. Or was it an Unabomber? I like to say Unabomber. Okay. And in those investigations and convictions and the whole process, there were no leaks. All right. Okay. Let's just remember that. What's on the rest of the menu here is I don't know. It's Tuesday. It's only Tuesday. Amazon workers walked off the job mid-shift at a major West Coast air hub over low wages and heat safety. That would be San Bernardino, by the way, and it gets hot. Starbucks wants the National Labor Relations Board to temporarily suspend all union elections at its U.S. stores. And corporate America is facing its first tax on stock buybacks in the Biden bill. Good. After the break, we move to the chef's table where former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison took on extra ministerial duties and powers in secret. Oh. He had an overriding signature over the ministers that were actually there. Isn't that nice? And denying Tehran was behind the stabbing of Salman Rushdie. An Iranian official said he deserved it, though. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending Netroots Nation 22 in Pittsburgh, the first in-person meetup in 2 years, and just giving a general heads up, no body rubbing, okay? There's a body rubbing pox going on out there in the world, and so just be careful. And let alone the flu and COVID. Everybody forgets about COVID now. What's up with that? But all that stated, Kelly will be bringing us some quite interesting content, as always occurs at Netroots Nation, and this time she is free to roam and find the personages themselves and bring them, in some cases, in front of the camera now. Kelly, this is radio. But anyway, stay tuned for some great content from Netroots Nation, and you can find it here at Netroots Radio. If you would look across our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left, from that chat room link, of course, you will notice that there is the Patreon link. And if you could afford maybe to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay our bills. And they keep increasing, darn them. And that allows us then, by paying our bills, to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting like a powerhouse for over 11 years of 24/7, 365 continuous resistance broadcasting. That's what we do, all right? And that's our civic duty. And we thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill that civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Now, I'll tell you why. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime, and you can find those show notes and links diaries by going to the link that you can find on my Twitter feed. So there. Oh, I guess I need to give a heads up. The fake Justice Putnam account that was harassing my followers, you, and myself, and potentially doxing my family, that account has been suspended. So we're waiting to see if they had threatened to just keep making up accounts. So we'll see what happens. I don't deserve it. I'm not a blue check. But thank you. I had an impersonator, a harassing one. I mean, I guess there's a fine line between parody and, impersonating wrongfully. Well, they broke the rules and they're gone. And I don't know why I deserved it. I guess I got caught up in the concerted effort to, take the heat off the big guy who's wanted for spying and selling state secrets. All right. After that was done, follow me at Justice Putnam, and you'll find out everything. If you would like to follow the show, you follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And of course, let's not forget the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library going back 11 years. Can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. So check it out. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. I forgot to tell you, we roast corn, and we put that in the chowder too. So just fair warning, okay? This offering here in the Bistro Cafe is out of the Washington Post by Lauren Cowrie Gurley and Carolyn O'Donovan. Dozens of Amazon employees at the company's Air Hub in San Bernardino, California, on Monday yesterday abandoned their workstations mid-shift over low wages and concerns regarding heat safety. The walkout in Southern California marks the first coordinated labor action in Amazon's growing air freight division, which uses Prime-branded planes to fly packages and goods around the country, much like UPS or FedEx. The employees, who are independently organized, said they did not plan to return to work on Monday in an effort to pressure Amazon to raise wages and improve safety. Organizers said more than 150 people walked out on Monday afternoon yesterday, and managers had already slowed some operations in anticipation of the action. While a small fraction of the 1,500 employees who work at the hub in various shifts walked out, such a work stoppage can create logistical headaches and disruptions. Amazon spokesman Paul Flanagan contested that number, saying the company's tally of workers who participated was actually about 74, not 150. Half. Monday's walkout is the latest sign that pro-union sentiment is spreading throughout Amazon's ranks, this time at a uniquely vulnerable point in its logistics network. Amazon depends heavily on a few air hubs to keep millions of packages moving every day, which means the effect of a strike or work stoppage at any of those facilities would have greater impact than a similar action at a regional warehouse. Even as Amazon, the nation's second largest private employer, pits its weight against organized labor, trying, for example, to get the results of the Amazon labor union's historic election victory in Staten Island thrown out, the walkout in California demonstrates how workers are continuing to independently organize around the country. Durbin of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Starbucks yesterday, Monday, asked the National Labor Relations Board to temporarily suspend all union elections at its U.S. stores citing allegations from a board employee that regional NLRB officials improperly coordinated with union organizers. In a letter to the board chairman and other officials, Starbucks said the unnamed career NLRB employee informed the company about the activity, which happened in the board's St. Louis office in the spring while it was overseeing a union election at a Starbucks store in Overland Park, Kansas. The store is one of 314 U.S. Starbucks locations where workers have petitioned the NLRB to hold union elections since late last year. More than 220 of those stores have voted to unionize. The company opposes the unionization effort. The Seattle coffee giant alleges that St. Louis Labor Board officials made special arrangements for pro-union workers to vote in person at its office when they did not receive mail-in ballots, even though Starbucks and the union had agreed that store elections would be handled by mail-in ballot. You get what's going on here? Somehow, thousands or somehow like a sizable number of ballots were not mailed. How did that happen? All right, I'm just saying. In its letter, Starbucks referred to memos the regional office sent confirming that workers were allowed to come to the office and vote in person after the union told the regional office that some workers had not received ballots in the mail. The memo, citing board protocol, said the workers voted alone in an empty office, according to Starbucks. But because observers were not present, no one can be sure who appeared to vote, whether NLRB personnel had inappropriate communications with the voters, told them how to vote, showed them how to vote, or engaged in other undisclosed conduct, Starbucks wrote in its letter. Starbucks said regional board officials also disclosed confidential information to the union, including which workers' ballots had arrived in the mail to be counted. What? Starbucks Workers United, the group seeking to unionize U.S. Starbucks stores, accused the company of trying to distract attention away from their unprecedented anti-union campaign, including firing over 75 union leaders across the country while simultaneously trying to halt all union elections. Ultimately, this is Starbucks' latest attempt to manipulate the legal process for their own means and prevent workers from exercising their fundamental right to organize, the group said in a statement. A spokesperson for the NLRB said the agency does not comment on open cases. Press Secretary Kayla Blado said the NLRB will carefully and objectively consider any challenges that Starbucks raises through established channels. Starbucks can also seek expedited review in the case, Blado said. Workers at the Overland Park store petitioned the NLRB to hold a vote in February. In April, workers voted 6-1 to unionize, but 7 additional ballots were the subject of challenges from Starbucks or the union. A hearing on those challenges was scheduled for today. Starbucks asked for that hearing to be delayed, but as of late Monday afternoon, the board had not postponed it. Risa L. Leibowitz, a professor of labor law and academic work director of the Worker Institute at Cornell University, said Starbucks' push to delay the hearing was curious. Leibowitz said the hearing was the ideal place for Starbucks to present evidence about the Overland Park election and asked the board to investigate. This certainly seems to be a tactic to shift attention away from Starbucks' own conduct, Leibowitz said, and try to put negative connotations or allegations against the board. Gordon of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Democrats have pulled off a quiet first in their just-passed legislation addressing climate change and health care, the creation of a tax on stock buybacks, a cherished tool of corporate America that had long seemed untouchable. Under the bill, President Joe Biden is scheduled to sign into law today. Companies will face a new 1% excise tax on purchases of their own shares, effectively paying a penalty for a maneuver that they have long used to return cash to investors and bolster their stock price. And the tax takes effect in 2023. Buybacks have ballooned in recent years. They're forecast to reach $1 trillion in 2022 as companies have swelled with cash from sky-high profits. Oh, such a terrible Biden economy, isn't it? Investors, including pension and retirement funds, like the buybacks, but fiery critics of big corporations and Wall Street, like Warren and Sanders, loathe them, calling the practice paper manipulation to enrich senior executives and big shareholders. Centrist Democrats, too, such as Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, have long criticized buybacks. Democrats say that instead of returning cash to shareholders, big companies should use the money to increase employees' wages or invest in the business. They are hoping the excise tax is projected to bring the government an additional $74 billion in revenue over 10 years, will cause a major shift in corporate behavior. But some experts are skeptical that this tax will work as intended. They note that businesses have other methods for rewarding shareholders, raising the prospect that legislation aimed at halting one corporate stock practice could instead facilitate another with new and unpredictable effects on the economy. In other words, crooks always find a way to break the law. Why do we have laws? Because crooks always figure out a way to break the law. All right, let's go to our break. And when we get back from our break, because that's the law, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. It's great to have friends, especially if you're an Indo-Pacific bottlenose dolphin, because new research shows that the males who were the most popular with the lads are also the most successful with the ladies. Researchers describe how these affable marine mammals maintain and leverage their complex social connections in a pair of papers in the journal Current Biology.
Male dolphins form lifelong cooperative relationships.
Stephanie King of the University of Bristol. She's been studying the dolphin population that inhabits Shark Bay, a UNESCO World Heritage Site off the coast of Western Australia.
By studying populations like the Shark Bay dolphins for many years, we start to see the complex ways that they maintain their important social relationships.
These connections are more than just casual acquaintanceships. They're crucial for the dolphins to be able to fend off rivals and secure mates.
When navigating their social world, it is those males that are more adept at building strong friendships that are ultimately more successful.
So, what do these aquatic alliances look like?
In Shark Bay, every male dolphin is embedded in a social network consisting of 4 to 14 males.
Livia Gerber of the University of New South Wales, Sydney.
These 4 to 14 males are also known as second-order alliances, and they are the core social unit of the male bottlenose dolphins in Shark Bay.
This dolphin party consists of unrelated individuals of a similar age that remain together for decades. Now, when one of these dolphins is looking for love, he'll select 1 or 2 wingmen, or maybe fin pals, from this larger posse to help him find a fertile female.
Well, it was previously known that males have to cooperate in order to sire offspring in Shark Bay. It wasn't known which male is the most successful one.
Is it the male with the most experience? The one with the largest territory? Or is there something about the bromance that holds the key to reproductive success?
To answer this question, I therefore looked at the genetic profiles of more than 400 dolphins in Shark Bay and carried out paternity tests.
Once she identified the daddies, she could determine what quality they shared.
I was quite surprised by the results because they were contrasting to so many other species, where the oldest males sire most offspring or the males with the largest territories. As opposed to what we see in these other species, male bottlenose dolphins that have the strongest social bonds and multiple strong social bonds, so the most popular males, sire most offspring.
Gerber says that the males with more friends are likely more often invited to cruise for females, giving them more opportunities for cooperative canoodling. Okay, so dolphins do better on group dates. But how do they establish and maintain these critical friendships?
Through physical contact, much like hugging or holding hands in humans.
Or like grooming in other primates, like chimps or monkeys.
Where individuals will devote a lot of time and energy into grooming their closest friends to strengthen those relationships.
Emma Shreskin of the University of Bristol. She says the problem with all this physical interaction is there's only so many hours in a day.
When group sizes become larger, this places a constraint on how much time is available for an individual to devote to grooming key social partners.
Enter the social bonding hypothesis.
In this hypothesis, vocal exchanges can serve as a replacement for grooming to maintain social bonds.
Like us chatting regularly with our circle of friends.
For dolphins, those chats take the form of exchanging signature whistles.
A signature whistle is a vocalization completely unique to each dolphin that functions much like a human name.
That was Kooks, a member of the Alley Cat Alliance. And that's his pal Pimento.
So when they use their signature whistle, they're advertising their identity to those around them as a way to maintain group cohesion.
So Shreskin set out to determine which dolphins were getting physical and which were more or less phoning it in.
The results were surprising. I had anticipated that the way dolphins use their signature whistles would be akin to how primates do.
For apes and monkeys, chit-chat is more common between besties. But for dolphins?
When we look at just that core alliance group, we see that increased vocal exchanges occur between those with weaker social bonds. So while we do observe that vocal exchanges are indeed occurring between friends rather than strangers, they're occurring between distant friends rather than best friends.
Like Alley Cat's Spirit and Guppy, which Shreskin says kind of makes sense.
I liken these results to living with a partner. So when you live with someone, you typically don't have to call or text them as much because much of your bonding occurs together in your home.
But for friends who are more far-flung, you might be more apt to send a shout-out rather than making the effort to get together to bump fists. Or fins. For Scientific Americans, 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the birthday of the longtime leader of the AFL-CIO, George Meany. Meany grew up in the Bronx with his Irish Catholic family. His father was the president of the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters. Meany left school at the age of 16 and signed on as an apprentice with the pipefitters. 10 years later, he was elected as the youngest member of the union's executive board. Within 2 years, he entered full-time union work, becoming a business agent. In 1934, he took the reins as president of the New York State Federation of Labor. 5 years later, he became the secretary-treasurer of the American Federation of Labor. At the AFL, Meany played an important role in the international labor movement. He helped to form the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions at the end of World War II. Meany then became president of the AFL in 1952. As president, Meany helped to lead the merger of the AFL and the CIO in 1955. The merger brought 15 million working people together into one association. Meany was known for his anti-communist positions and for having little patience for union radicalism. He was vocal in pushing for protections against employment discrimination in the historic 1964 Civil Rights Act. He also supported the passage of the 1970 Occupational Safety and Health Act. The act brought safer workplace standards to millions of workers throughout the country. Meany became the face of the labor movement, quite literally. Twice he appeared with his trademark cigar on the cover of Time magazine. He remained at the helm of the AFL for a quarter of a century, retiring in 1979. He died in 1980, but he will be remembered as one of the nation's strongest voices for human and civil rights. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.